Well, let's bring in citizenship law expert from the University of Canberra, Professor Kim Rubenstein. Great to talk to you today. I mean, when we hear about the increasing numbers in Sydney and Melbourne, do you understand why the government has done this?
Look, I think there are a couple of things that need correcting from that report. Every individual has a right to challenge any government decision, and there are grounds for challenging this decision at the moment. The grounds or the explanation that the government has provided is in relation to quarantine, but the issue is about leaving the country, not coming back into the country. And so this restriction on essentially trapping any individual in Australia from leaving does not sit well with the Biosecurity Act itself, which says explicitly that the health minister's determinations must be proportionate to the health end and the least restrictive measure. So just as a matter of law, there are grounds for challenging it. Of course, a law is lawful until it is challenged and found unlawful by a court, but there are really serious grounds upon which this can be challenged.
So what you're essentially saying is that in terms of biosecurity and in terms of the Australian government saying we are doing this for biosecurity or for health reasons, you're saying that they would have a case if it was somebody coming into Australia because they'd be protecting Australia, but that they have less of a case on preventing people from leaving.
Exactly. And in fact, interestingly, Jane, for people coming into Australia, it's not the Biosecurity Act that is limiting them, but rather it's the Air Navigation Act that is being used to reduce the numbers of people who can come in at any one time. That's the travel cap. And they're not using biosecurity for that. They're using an alternative means. And there would be, I think, serious questions even within the Biosecurity Act. You may remember that there were 2 weeks when any person in India was banned from coming into the country, and they did use the Biosecurity Act for that. That was a very short period. There was an attempt to challenge that, and your news reporter was correct that that specific prevention was found to be upheld as lawful, but there were narrower grounds upon which that were challenged. And I think this is about leaving the country, not about returning to the country. And leaving the country is actually not about quarantine. So there are actually even constitutional questions about whether this properly comes under the constitutional head of power of quarantine.
So are you saying that actually if somebody does want to challenge this and they do want to leave the country, that they could well have grounds to do that legally?
Indeed, that is exactly the case. So our system of law, as in the UK, is that someone has to have standing. So we have to wait till someone is actually not given permission to leave, who's not given an exemption. As soon as a decision like that is made, that individual would have a basis to go into a court, the Federal Court of Australia, to seek the court's review of the lawfulness of that decision. Now, what is interesting is when the announcement was originally made about increasing the scope of people who are not allowed to leave, including Australians who normally live overseas and are just here visiting, there was a very strong outcry, and the minister was reported as saying that they would give all those people an exemption. Now, if they're going to give everyone an exemption, why introduce the ban in the first place? But I think it is really significant to watch whether, in fact, they will automatically give people an exemption. And then, as I said, that raises a significant question. How lawful is this to restrict all citizens from leaving the country?
Because, of course, it also affects those, as you say, who may normally reside in another country or who may perhaps have relatives in another country and really want to visit them. You know, we know that, you know, throughout COVID, so many people have lost loved ones in different countries and haven't been able to visit them in their final days. It does discriminate against those, doesn't it?
It does, and it's really quite astounding in a country like Australia, which has 49% of its residents who are either born outside of Australia or have a parent born outside of Australia. So you're really talking about a significant proportion of Australian society who do have family overseas, who are being prevented and have been for some people over 2 years from seeing their family. So that really is a significant impact on the moral standing of those people as being equally treated. Of course, everybody wants COVID to be contained, but if this government had introduced earlier better quarantine facilities, special purpose-built quarantine facilities around the country, recognising the large number of Australians who need to travel by virtue of that reality of our population, then we could have better balanced the needs of those Australians who need to travel for family and keeping COVID out of our borders.
OK, Professor Kim Rubenstein from the University of Canberra. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jane.